Thank you all for coming to this presentation titled Supporting Student Self-Regulation in the Classroom. My name is Amber Nipper, and this is my occupational therapy doctoral capstone project. This was made in collaboration with Elise Carton, OTR/L. Today, we have three main objectives. We'll first define self regulation and how it looks across the lifespan. We will dive into body systems and how they impact self regulation. And lastly, we'll provide some OT insight on how to empower your students in your classroom. We really hope that this presentation can make your life easier in your hard efforts to manage a classroom of children and all of their individual needs. First, let's start with this word I keep saying over and over again: self regulation. Self-regulation, as defined by the ALERT program, which we will cover later, is the ability to attain, maintain, and change how alert one feels appropriately for a task or situation. It can also be commonly referred to as emotional regulation. Self-regulation involves many neurological connections in the brain as well as all of the sensory systems, which we will dive more into in part 2. So, in the definition of self regulation, we mentioned the neurological component, or more simply, the brain, the sensory systems, and the ability of a person, which here is represented as a body, to manage its input for a task or situation. When these systems are in sync, students are better able to focus, learn, and interact positively. However, when they are out of balance, students may struggle to manage their emotions and behavior. As you may imagine, each of these systems individually are very complex. This is what makes self regulation more complicated than one may originally think, as all these systems need to work together to help students maintain the optimal alertness needed for learning. So, what is the optimal state of alertness, or in other words, arousal? This comes from the arousal theory of motivation. This theory outlines various levels of arousal, with low arousal being equated to boredom and high arousal being more of an anxious or nervous state. Individuals tend to seek out activities that keep them within their optimal state of arousal, which is also the best time for learning to take place. However, students are still learning about themselves and their bodies and may not know what their body needs or wants. This is why teachers play such a pivotal role in understanding and supporting their students. Every individual has a different range of optimal state of arousal. Arousal also changes throughout the day, often looking like a wave. For example, here you can see the student in green may enter with low arousal, maybe still tired or sleepy, but easily enters their optimal state of arousal. Since their range is a bit larger, they're able to stay here for a majority of the day and they are ready to learn. This is in contrast to the student in blue, who enters in a higher state of arousal, maybe a bit anxious or overstimulated. Their optimal range of arousal is not as large, and they are not as prepared to learn throughout the day. I personally relate to student 2 in blue. I enter work after a fresh cup of coffee, caffeinated and ready to go. I start to dwindle again, then after eating some lunch and drinking some more coffee, I get my second win to last me through the rest of the day. By the end of the day, I'm definitely dropping again. Remember though, these are not the only two arousal patterns that exist, these are just examples. Take a moment to consider, what do you think your arousal patterns or trends are? What strategies do you use to bring yourself back to your optimal state? How alert do you feel right now? Do you need a moment to stretch or stand up? During this video, stay in tune to what your body needs and pause me when you need to. Let's talk a bit more about the development of self regulation. The ALERT program, which again I'll share more about later, breaks self regulation into three orders. First order self regulation begins as babies and includes these automatic functions such as heart rate and respiration, and really what is needed for survival. Then we move into second order self regulation, which is where we begin to organize our bodies a bit better. This can be demonstrated through the suck, swallow, breathe patterns of infants, adaptive movement, using our body and our hands in functional and meaningful ways, as well as achieving or changing our state as we grow older. Third order self regulation is some big stuff, and the hard skills children and adults continue to grow and learn. It includes sustained attention, planning, execution of strategies, problem solving, and being able to recognize on your own when your state needs a change. So, a step above just being able to change your state. Really, all of this comes down to one very advanced skill: executive functioning. Executive function and self regulation skills are the mental processes that enable us to plan, focus attention, remember instructions, and juggle multiple tasks successfully. It begins with all of the sensory input coming into your brain, starting here at your lower brain. Then your brain, specifically your middle brain structures here, are determining if this input is safe or not safe. If safe, the information continues to travel out. Executive functioning, represented in yellow, can occur here in the frontal lobe of your brain. Your brain can effectively process all the sensory input and formulate a response. However, if registered as not safe, this input never leaves your lower and midbrain structures, and you immediately enter fight or flight mode. We also have to really think about kids that have experienced trauma and how their brain might register input as dangerous, even if we do not expect it to be. Regulation and higher level abilities needed to do well and overcome challenges can be hard to access when we feel stressed, fearful, or unsafe. A good metaphor for executive functioning is thinking of airport traffic control. Just as an air traffic control system at a busy airport safely manages the arrivals and departures of many aircrafts on multiple runways, the brain needs this skill set to filter distractions, prioritize tasks, set and achieve goals, and control impulses. Your frontal lobe of the brain, where executive functioning occurs, is actually not fully developed until your mid 20s. Self regulation and the development of these higher level executive functioning skills are truly a lifelong process. It is because of this that even though we're talking about how to enhance self regulation, it really does not all fall completely on the child. It really comes down to be more about co regulation. Caregivers, including teachers, have to pay close attention to the shifting emotional and psychological cues of children while also regulating their own emotional state. When caregivers are able to demonstrate attunement and provide supportive, consistent responses in the midst of arousal, children develop a growing capacity for self regulation. Wow, so much information. What does this really mean? Giving people a short answer is not my specialty, but I tried my best here. Self regulation is not about hiding or preventing emotions, rather, it's about experiencing emotions such as anger, excitement, and embarrassment, and then having the self knowledge to respond proactively and adaptively to life experiences that can be internal or external. And it is so important for children to be able to focus and learn at school, as well as to be able to appropriately take turns, share and express emotions with others, and so much more. Now that we have started to dive into this huge topic of self regulation, and we already started to talk about the body a bit, specifically the brain, let's continue to talk about the other body systems. As a quick reminder, self regulation involves your brain, all 8 of your sensory systems, and your body. And when we think of self regulation in an academic setting, I really like this visual called the Taylor Trott Pyramid of Learning. If you look at the very tipsy top of this triangle, you will see academic learning. From a sensory integration perspective, this means that for academic learning to take place, all of these systems below have to be in order and working together. Everything in green is unconscious. Often we don't even realize it's occurring or how hard our bodies have worked to meet these needs and develop skills. But sometimes students need a little more support to meet these unconscious needs, freeing up their ability and space for conscious learning and engagement. Starting at the bottom of this pyramid, you have your sensory systems. You're getting the sensory input, learning how to make sense of it, what it means, and what to do with it all. Missing from this is a sensory system of interoception, which we will cover later when we further define all the sensory systems, so just hang tight. Then we go into sensory motor and perceptual motor development. This is where we start to develop a body scheme, postural security, motor planning, as well as being able to adjust our posture, focus our attention, and develop eye hand coordination. This baby crawling here is learning about his body scheme, planning his motor output, and learning about both sides of his body. The video I will show next makes me laugh, but also highlights just how much goes into crawling. These 2 children in the middle are working so hard to see the toy and move their hands the correct distance to grab the toy, aka eye hand coordination, while also using attention and perception skills. They are also proudly adjusting their posture as they reach or learn to walk, just like the child in this last photo. There is so much skill going into these tasks. Who knew play was so complex? All these skills are also challenged and used in the classroom setting. Take a second to think about just how much goes into copying notes down from the board. Posture, eye-hand coordination, perception, attention, you name it.
Boys, come on, crawl for your daddy, okay? Come on, it's very simple. It's your right hand, left knee, left hand, right knee. Very simple. Let's take off. You guys want to race? All right, here we go. On your mark. Get set, and we out of here. Let's go, boys. Okay, boys. Come on.
I hope that made you chuckle. Right arm, left arm, right leg. I can't even keep track of all those steps. Now we're finally at the top of this triangle. This is where we reach the more conscious and observable skills that are often expected in the behavior we notice from students. Children are really expected to be here at the top of the triangle all day long. So much has to be working together to achieve the big goal of academic learning and to stay at this expectation all day long. Our expectations of students in the classroom really has not changed much over the years, but the behaviors and the activity children partake in has been shifting. Less and less are children having the opportunity to move their bodies and develop these skills in the pyramid and to learn about their bodies. For example, in 1969, 48% of students walked or biked to school compared to 10.4% in 2017. Often, I am sure children are getting ready in households that are rushing to leave on time, as I myself sometimes do. Then they might be watching their iPad or a show in the car, entering the classroom very stimulated with little opportunity for release. This can play a big role into self regulation and observable disruptive classroom behaviors. So, finally, to the senses. As I cover each sense, I want you to think about how that sense would be challenged on a playground or playing outside compared to watching a show or a video or playing video games. We will start with vision. Vision is actually the last of your senses to develop after birth, but once it is developed, it becomes your dominant sense. As you may expect, it is responsible for seeing. Visual input your brain receives and works really hard to make sense of includes color, shape, orientation, motion. Eye muscles coordinate the movement of the eyes during activities such as reading or when students have to look up and down from their paper to copy notes from the board. Olfactory, or your sense of smell, is responsible for processing smell. This includes discriminating odors, enhancing the detection of certain odors, and also filtering out odors. Your auditory sense is responsible for hearing. These small structures in your ears detect vibrations and are important for understanding space, such as if you hear an echo when you stand in the middle of a large room, attention, and social interactions. This sense is very connected to the vestibular system, which also relies on these inner ear structures, as we will discuss shortly. Gustatory is responsible for your sense of taste. It allows us to discriminate between safe and harmful foods, including tastes such as sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. A new taste that I did not put on here is unami. Tactile is responsible for touch, including texture, temperature, light and deep pressure, vibration, as well as pain. This is connected very closely to proprioception. Proprioception is input from your body, including joints, muscles, and tendons. This sensory system cues you into where your body is in space and is important for muscle tone, postural control, grading or adjusting strength, and coordinating movement. Your vestibular sense is the sensory system I said shares the same structures as auditory. This system provides you important information regarding position and orientation of your head in relation to gravity. It helps to control our eye movements, keep us upright, and plays a huge role in balance and orientation. If you feel dizzy after spinning or get a little car sick, this is the vestibular sensory system. Our last sensory system is interoception. This is our internal organs that tells us if we're hungry, thirsty, if our heart is beating too fast or too slow, how we are breathing, and if we need to use the restroom. Your brain processes all the sensory input it receives, makes sense of it, and produces a response. For everything to run smoothly, these sensory systems need to work together in harmony. When they don't, the brain can become overwhelmed and exhausted, making it especially challenging for students to focus and function effectively. The student is often asking themselves, how do I meet the needs of my body and the expectations of the classroom and the school setting at the same time? And the teacher is wondering, what modifications can I make to support and empower my students to learn? So let us jump right into specific strategies and the tangible what can you do part of this training. Please feel free to take a break, stretch, or do anything you need for your body. Let's start with a discussion about equality and equity. When we talk about equality, it means providing the same resources or strategies to every student. For example, giving all students the same sensory tools for self regulation. But equality doesn't consider that each student is unique and may benefit from additional supports or strategies. Equity, on the other hand, is about meeting each student where they are. In addition to giving everyone the same tools, we provide a student with as many tools as they need to meet their individual body needs, allowing them to see over the fence and watch the baseball game. This can also look like the students who stick with various strategies and may utilize two or three, compared to students who may not need as many. Equity ensures all students have the support they need to succeed, even if that support looks different for each student. Let's address the elephant in the room that if we do it for one student, we have to do it for all. It's natural for students to want to try what others are using, so let them. This fits with an equality approach, where we allow every student to explore or try out a strategy. Equity means recognizing that some students may stick with a strategy because it addresses their specific needs and works best for their bodies, while others may try it and realize it's not the right fit. Students that need it will gravitate towards it, use it, and may even start to ask for it if it's not present. Students that don't need it or that it doesn't work for will probably forget it even exists, and that's part of the process. By giving strategies time and being flexible, we ensure that students who need accommodations can use them effectively. When something doesn't work, we evaluate why through tools like the ABC strategy, which I believe most teachers are familiar with, and the symptoms checklist from the STAR Institute of Sensory Processing. The ABC strategy stands for antecedent, behavior, consequence. The symptoms checklist is a tool created by the STAR Institute of Sensory Processing to better understand manifestations of differences in sensory processing that are considered outside the typical range. You can find it through their website or attached to this training module. This is a great resource that can be completed by parents. There are different checklists for infants/toddlers, preschool, school age, and adolescents/adults. In addition to you teachers having the daunting task of understanding and supporting so many students in your classroom, you also have to understand and stay regulated yourself. This is quite the task and also requires you to know what your bodies need on a moment to moment basis. Teachers are really the Zen masters of the classroom. It is important that you ground yourselves and then help keep your students stay grounded. One thing I do in the morning is I wake up early to make sure I can sit on the couch with my cup of coffee and play Wordle. Then I look at my calendar and prepare myself for what I have to do that day. Sometimes the students entering your classroom have not had this opportunity to sit back and reflect on the day and what to expect. I know time is of essence and there's so much to cover in one academic day, but taking this time to prepare your students for the day ahead and check in with their bodies can actually allow things to go a bit smoother and more successfully. As you will see on the next slide, there are so many strategies that can be used. But as part of being a Zen master, you may need to use strategies yourself to stay grounded and calm. And this is actually a great way for students to see you model and using strategies. This could look like announcing you're starting to feel overwhelmed and taking a deep breath. The important part of deep breathing is really about the exhale, which is why I included this pinwheel. You can reference visual schedules and graphics around the room to help you and your students stay on track. And you can also help children develop a sense of interoception through modeling, such as announcing you can tell your tummy is hungry because it's making noise and you're feeling sleepy, or by checking in with your heart rate after a movement break. I would not be surprised if you have already been told about or utilized various strategies shown on this slide. Strategies such as labels, visual timers, alternative seating, and assigning certain students to classroom roles can be extremely useful. But here, I'm going to share some of my OT knowledge and brain that will hopefully help you to understand the reasoning behind these strategies, to know when to implement strategies and when to adapt strategies as needed for certain students. I will share three case studies with you, starting with our friend Joey. Joey is a first grade student with a diagnosis of autism. It is noticed that he struggles with auditory and touch input and that he makes a lot of noise to calm himself, specifically humming. The teacher has noticed he has a rigid play structure and becomes upset when a peer joins in a non preferred manner. Joey also relies heavily on a clear schedule and becomes upset if his routine is disrupted. On the symptoms checklist, we can see he has some clear sensitivities, is easily distracted, has difficulty making friends, and gets stuck on task, making it hard to move on, and this might explain why transitions and a clear schedule is so important to him. Let's take a moment to think of some strategies. If we notice he is sensitive to smell, it might be a good idea to place him further away from the diffuser on our desk or the child who brings in a really stinky snack or lunch. He is sensitive to loud noises, so maybe providing a warning before the school bell, placing him further away from the speaker, or asking his parents if he has noise canceling headphones he can use in anticipation of loud noises. And lastly, it was reported that he does not like to transition between activities. His parents shared that he does not do well when his routine is disrupted. So, a clear schedule, maybe even a visual schedule on the wall close to his desk, along with visual timers to alert him of an upcoming transition, could all be very useful strategies. So let's see what happens here. Our focus is meeting Joey's sensory needs. The teacher implemented a variety of strategies, including playing a recording of Noah humming during structured learning times, teaching peers his play structure so they can play together, and allowing Joey to roam or stand close by during circle time. With these strategies, Joy was able to successfully stay engaged for a longer duration during structured learning time. He had successful peer interactions, and during circle time, Joey stayed close to the teacher and other children, rather than becoming agitated and trying to leave. Some additional strategies the teacher could try include creating clear boundaries for Joey, such as using tape to mark his wandering zone so he does not go too far. It is important to note that for some kids, especially if they are not very aware of their bodies or environment, might not even notice tape on the ground. This would require you to think about how you can set up your classroom to create more tangible, visual, or tactile boundaries. Remember, these are all just examples and will need to be modified to match both your classroom and your students. And if Joey does need a moment to calm down, the teacher can ensure Joey has a safe, quiet corner in her classroom, called the cool down tent. Our second case study is about Allie, a third grade student. The teacher notices slow classroom performance. Her parents are worried about her ability to make friends. She doesn't seem to have any strong sensory aversions or preferences, but has low arousal and endurance, demonstrated through frequently slouching and laying her head on the table. From the STAR symptom checklist, we also notice she is slow to perform tasks and may slouch often, which was already mentioned. Handwriting is a big challenge for Allie, as well as learning new motor activities since she prefers sedentary activities. Her parents share that they are worried about her ability to make friends, so that makes sense why they check this as well. Lastly, her parents reported she confuses similar sounding words or may misinterpret questions or requests. What do you think the focus for Allie will be? For Allie, our focus is on enhancing her arousal through sensory input. Strategies to do this include clapping, singing, and marching to classroom routines such as lineup to increase Allie's chances of noticing what is happening, allowing her to stand to complete desk work, increasing proprioceptive input through her legs and lower joints. Her vestibular system is also challenged when she has to bend over to write. The teacher adjusted Allie's schedule to allow her to get up and move around the room, such as turning in smaller parts of assignments or carrying heavy items such as books, maybe back to the library. A lot of schools have those really heavy doors, so maybe she would be a good student to assign as door holder, which could also decrease her chances of bumping into classmates. Allie could also be the person to pass out papers to the class, allowing her to move around more. Also, the teacher provided written instructions and requests to Allie on a whiteboard. Outcomes with Allie include the teacher being pleased with her increased participation, with less slouching, and Allie laid her head on the table less. She started to use strategies to keep herself focused or in her right arousal state, such as getting up to grab water as she started to get tired or drift away. The teacher was okay with this as she viewed it as an adaptation to their current strategy. The teacher also noticed that she did better in the library when they moved right before going, so she added this to the routine. Allie also started to stand in the library when reading, which showed a generalization of the strategy of standing in the classroom to do work. Lastly, with written instructions rather than verbal instruction, there was decreased confusion and misinterpretation of verbal instructions and requests. Again, to have clear boundaries, tape can be used around her standing desk or counter space to clearly outline where she is allowed to stand and be. Our last case study is about Dylan, a fifth grade student. Dylan often wanders around the room, fidgets with items, or sometimes will squat in his chair instead of sitting flat on his bottom. It is noted that he likes all type of sensory input, especially movement. On the STAR symptom checklist, it is reported that he is easily distractible and out of his seat often, which matches what we were just told about him. He avoids seated tasks such as handwriting, but really craves roughhousing games and he is in constant motion. Lastly, he gets stuck on task and has a hard time moving on to the next activity. What do you think the focus for Dylan will be? Can you think of strategies that would be good to use? I'll give you a minute to write a couple down. If you said our focus is going to be meeting his sensory needs, you were right. Here, I want to point out how these classroom adaptations to meet his high sensory needs are very similar to the strategies used with Allie, who had low arousal and needed support to keep her arousal up. We are doing many similar strategies, such as clapping, singing, and marching, or just adding more movement breaks. Adjusting his work methods, but instead of standing, we're going to try a TheraBand between his desk legs to increase proprioceptive input through his legs and lower joints. And we're going to adjust his work schedule similar to what we did with Allie, allowing Dylan more opportunities to move around the room. After trying these strategies for a few weeks, Dylan's teacher realizes he does not really use the TheraBand between his desk legs. Let's take a minute to think about why this might be the case. If it's between the legs of his desk, he might forget that it is there. You can try cueing him to see if he will use it, but sometimes out of sight, out of mind. It takes a lot of postural adjustment to get your feet on the TheraBand. Is this too much for him? It very well could be. You have to lean back, lift your legs, bend your right knee, move it again, put it straight so that it's on the band, and repeat the whole process again for the other leg. Whew! After closer observation, she notices that Dylan moves the most and has the hardest time sitting still towards the end of the day. This is also when her classroom completes the most seated desk work. She wonders if a seating alternative, such as an exercise ball or a tactile disc, would allow Dylan to meet his sensory needs, arousal, and maintain his regulation. An exercise ball would provide similar up and down movement or input to when he squats in his chair, but be less distractive to the students around him. The teacher tried the strategy, and this works well for Dylan. He must be most alert in the morning, which means his arousal may drop towards the end of the day. Again, please remember that other students may have high arousal at the beginning of the day and never drop. They can stay high all day long. These are just examples. Sensory needs can change throughout the day drastically, so it's very important to check in with your body and your student's body after recess, lunch, and other periodic times during the day to ask your students to think about what their bodies need. You can also prompt or provide cues to students to switch to alternative seating or strategies, such as prompting Dylan to use the exercise ball in the afternoon. Being open and flexible as you and your students' needs change is so important. Don't forget, needs can also change throughout the school year. This is an ongoing process, not a one and done deal. I am actually very similar to Dylan. I am recording this towards the end of the day on an exercise ball right now. However, if I had more active movement in the morning, I would probably want a seat with more support that I could relax in. As we have seen, seating alternatives provide important opportunities to provide input to your vestibular, proprioceptive, and tactile sensory systems. As I mentioned before, you can try seating alternatives with your students, and the ones that it works for will often stick with it. If you have a variety of alternatives, such as an exercise ball, disc cushion, or an area to stand or a standing desk, children will often gravitate towards what their body desires and needs. However, don't forget how important it is to prompt or cue your students to check into their bodies and try strategies that work well for them. We also recognize that seating alternatives may not always be best for certain tasks, especially as you guys work on standardized testing or other types of classroom or school requirements where seating alternatives may not always be allowed. There's a lot to be said about seating and posture, but we're just covering the basics between a few alternatives and what good seating posture looks like. So, good seating posture rule of thumb is 90-90-90. Your hips, knees, and ankle joints should be at a 90-degree angle. You should see an upright and straight back, and if possible, such as with a computer screen, you want to try to keep the screen at eye level. This can be hard if you don't have an adjustable monitor or some type of laptop stand. Really important is to not forget about the feet. They can be hidden under the desk and sometimes out of sight, out of mind again. But we want to be very intentional and keep the feet in mind. Students' feet should be supported, and if they are not, you can place a footstool, box, or a couple of books under their feet to keep them stable and at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so for our last little bit of time together, I am going to share 3 programs with you all. These programs are generally cost effective, with their trainings being on the affordable side and have a lot of resources to support you and your classroom if interested. Each of these programs offers strategies and tools to help students understand and manage their emotions and behaviors. However, it's important to recognize that these programs are copyrighted and require formal training for proper implementation. The first program I will share with you is called the ALERT program. The ALERT program was created by occupational therapists to help children attain and maintain an optimal state of alertness. This is where our definition of self regulation at the beginning of the training came from. It uses a speedometer visual to ensure children's engines are running just right and also provides a free resource you can provide to families to explain what all this engine talk is about, as students may start to use this language to express themselves at home as well. The engine metaphor can be modified as well, such as here I modified it to be space themed. It uses the same language of too high, too low, or just right, but with the sun, moon, and earth instead of engines or cars. You can really get creative with this to match your classroom theme. To match the popular boho theme, you could have a bursting sun or prickly cactus to represent too high, a drooping leaf, plant, or flower for too low, and a mandala or flourishing flower for just right. Next, we'll talk about zones of regulation. The zones of regulation is an evidence based framework that helps children from age 4 and older understand and manage their emotions effectively. The program categorizes emotions into 4 zones: blue, green, yellow, and red, each representing different states of alertness and emotion. Here, you can see each zone. Blue includes feelings and emotions of sad, sick, tired. Green can include happy, calm, focused. Yellow includes frustrated, worried, excited. And lastly, red includes mad, angry, terrified, and other strong feelings. One thing I would like to highlight here is that the color red can have a bad connotation, and it is important to recognize that there are no bad zones. What zone do you think is represented here? I'll give you a second to think. That's right, it's yellow. Our last official program or curricula we will cover is called Powerfully You. This program focuses on relationships as a foundation for regulation, starting with body sensing and interoception as a foundation for understanding self awareness. For example, children learn about their activation and how to notice how activated their body is feeling in the moment without labeling their activation as good or bad. The battery symbol is a powerful metaphor for helping children recognize when they need to rest, refuel, or seek connection to maintain their regulation. Alright, so what are the key takeaways? Common language. Using a shared language to express emotions helps everyone in the classroom understand and support each other. Whether it's identifying an engine level, a zone color, a battery level, or something else, having this common language fosters better communication. No bad emotions. It's important to remember that no emotion, or engine level, zone color, or battery level, is bad. Each state serves a purpose and provides valuable information about what a student might need at that moment. Behavior as communication. Every behavior is an attempt to communicate something. By understanding the underlying message, we can respond more effectively and help students regulate their emotions and behavior. So, what now? Our goal is to empower you with the reasoning why we use certain strategies so that you can continue to empower your students in your classroom. Think about what action step you can take after this presentation. What will it be? It could be using the symptom checklist, searching seating alternatives, or thinking about what certain behaviors may be communicating to you about what a student may need in that moment. Here are my references if you would like to scan and follow up on any of them. We hope that this training was helpful to you. Thanks again for listening.